What's up, y'all? A little faith, and welcome to episode number 13 of season 2 of the Fagnostic podcast. I'm your hostess, not your Moses, Matt Hayes, and if I'm still giving you episodes, it means that I'm still looking for answers. Y'all, today I have a fascinating theologian on to discuss his approach towards engagement with the divine. Mason Mennenga is a successful podcaster and YouTuber and calls himself the internet's youth pastor. In this episode, you're going to hear about some of the new ideas and new voices in process theology. Bet you don't know what that is, do you? As well as a clear warning to Evangelical America based on history leading up to Nazi Germany. One of my favorite things we talk about today is Theopoetics. It may change your perception and maybe even offer hope towards the impact of spirituality in America. You can also catch Mason on his incredible podcast called A People's Theology. To read more of his writings and musings, check him out at masonmennenga.com. That's MASONMENNENGA.com. There's some fascinating articles there about creation, the difference between belief and faith, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Mason. Mason, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you here. I told you before we got started that you may be the most intellectual person that I have on this show to date. So I'm excited to hear you blow my mind.
Well, I tell you what, I can't imagine me being the smartest person on any episode of any podcast. That's
one visit to your website,
but also I just can't believe that that's actually true.
One visit to your website would suggest otherwise, but I'll let you prove your point. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Can you tell me, are you a believer?
I believe in lots of things. I believe in Bigfoot. I believe in reconciliation and abolition. And I also happen to believe in God. Those are a few of the things that I believe in.
It's funny because one of the things we're going to talk about today is actually about the word belief versus faith, as approached in some of your writings. And so that question has been very specific for, this is episode 37, I believe. And this will be the first time that we really kind of rephrase what that word means, which is the whole point of this podcast. So I'm excited to, 37 episodes in, get to the root of the word. And then now, can you identify your pronouns for us?
Yeah, I use he, him, his pronouns.
Awesome.
Those are what
awesome. I use. It's so funny. Actually, just as I asked this, I just realized that I had a dream last night that my dad had emailed me using pronouns in his closing, and I was so proud. But I think he did, like, instead of he, him, like he has or something like that. But it just dawned on me as we discussed your pronouns that I had this dream of my father using his pronouns. But anyway, I digress. So funny. You're calling from Colorado Springs. What you were going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I work for a seminary, and about a year ago, so I do like admissions. So like anybody that's, interested in our seminary, kind of work them through that process. And about a year ago, there was somebody that like submitted an inquiry to us, and we have like as an option to list your pronouns. And this person, they must have been like older, but they listed in their pronouns, Mr., like MR dot or period, and then / Mr., like spelled out like MIS. TER. It was like, I was like, oh, you're trying so hard, but also
that's
like
really endearing.
Total fail. It was so funny.
I love that. But rewind, a seminary that allows and encourages specification of pronouns. What the hell kind of seminary is that?
Yeah, well, there's a few of us out there. I work for a seminary called the United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. And we're a really interfaith seminary. So we have obviously Christian students, but we have a lot of Unitarian Universalist students and Buddhist students and Jewish students and Muslim students and Wiccan students and pagan students and atheists. So kind of the whole kit and caboodle.
Riddle me this. Why in the world would an atheist go to a seminary?
Yeah. So, there's lots of different forms of ministry out there. You don't have to just work at a church. You can do lots of different things, including chaplaincies. So there's a lot of atheist chaplains out there that still recognize that spiritual practices are really important, but they might not necessarily believe in God. And so, a lot of chaplains might do that kind of work with people, There's lots of reasons for an atheist to go to seminary. Maybe they want to learn a little bit more about theology and kind of the whole breadth of different kinds of atheism, and they might also be interested in learning about all the different types of theisms out there too. So yeah, I've got lots
That
of
makes
friends in
sense.
seminary who are atheists, and yes, but still recognize that spiritual practices and all of that is really important, and learning about theology is really interesting. And so those are some of the reasons why atheists would show up to seminary.
That is something I've never known until this moment. And it also makes me think maybe I can be an agnostic chaplain, because I do love,
Yeah.
I do appreciate that people have faith systems that guide their life. I just don't really subscribe to one. But
Yeah.
I've always found assisting people through life a very important goal of mine. But also, it kind of makes me think of the idea of theopoetics that I really want to dive into as well in this episode, because it really gave me a lot of space for hope, I think, within religion, because it seems that if more people understood that, because it also kind of made me think that there are more people practicing theopoetics than give themselves credit for, because
Right.
people are
Or they
looked
just aren't sure. They don't know that that term exists, that like
exactly.
way of understanding theology exists. Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
you
they
even
still are
said
doing it.
like in your writings that the greatest icons of theopoetics don't even know that that word exists.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's
I would certainly argue that. Yeah.
let's dive into this word to start this episode. Then tell me, for anyone that doesn't know, because we know theologian, we know poetics, we don't know theopoetics.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not just simply like theological poetry, right? Like it's not just opening the book of Psalms and thinking, oh, this is theopoetics. It could be, but that's not necessarily what it means. So obviously the theo and theopoetics means God. And the poetics part isn't, again, just poetry. It's actually it comes from the word poesis, which I believe is a Greek word. And poesis actually means like the making of. Okay. And so this is like theology or God making of. And so it's the actual like creating of theology that theopoetics is really interested in. And so oftentimes that could mean that you're doing theology through the medium of poetry, but it could also be music, it could also be other forms of art, it could even be being out in the streets protesting. That could
Yeah,
be theopoetics, right? And so wherever you think of the divine happening, like it's the actual making of the space for the divine to be active and present and involved in the world. And so yeah, I really kind of think of that as like theopoetics. It's the actual making of theology in lots of different ways. And so yeah, that's kind of the definition or a way of defining theopoetics.
would you say that the early church leaders, specifically the 12 disciples, were theopoetics?
Yeah, I mean, again, like they're doing theology in such interesting and radical ways, right? Like they're not just writing a bunch of words, multi syllable words down and thinking that that's theology. Their theology is actually being like lived out by feeding people, by taking care of the poor. And I'm sure we don't really see it in the gospel, so we don't really know this for sure. But I would imagine those 12 disciples are also really creative people too. So they might be, doing their theology through art or whatever creative things that they might be up to. So yeah, I would imagine a lot of those early disciples were also theopoets in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
So while theopoetics tends to be kind of a rhetoric or a hypothetical, there have been people and collections of people creating organizations or websites to kind of create a palpable sense of theopoetics as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of people who are interested in kind of getting like all those people that really seem to be doing that kind of way of doing theology, getting them all together and getting them talking about how it is that they do theology. And so there's a lot of those folks that are out there. One of the most well-known ones is an organization called Arts, Religion, Culture, and they run a conference called the Theopoetics Conference, which I don't think has happened in a few years, but it happened for a while. And yeah, it's that's one of those groups of people that are bringing all these theopoets together and being creative and talking about their work and how they understand the divine through all the different creative and interesting ways that they understand the divine.
How do you think that the Theopoetics is not take? Because from the outside, with someone who's so anti-religion, so done with evangelical versions of Christianity, how
Mm-hmm.
the idea of Theopoetics is like, oh my God, I could absolutely return to an organized community of people pursuing this interaction and inspiration with the divine. Why is this not taken off more? What's the stumbling blocks?
Yeah, as like a sort of like organization or as a term, Theopoetics hasn't really taken off in the way that I would hope so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't people out there who I would say are doing Theopoetics, right? Like you probably know of Martin Luther King Jr. I would say that kind of work of interrogating the systems of his day. I think that's one way of doing theopoetics, and you certainly know who he is, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think there's so many different ways that you might see theopoetics being played out in the world,
sure.
and we just might not necessarily say that's theopoetics, or most people wouldn't again know that word, and so we're not placing that word on it. But you could still describe it as theopoetics. And so, while that term isn't necessarily like the most popular thing, and I wish it was, but it's not, and that's fine because it doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't still doing theopoetic work
Sure.
out in the world.
Well, friends, countrymen, you've heard it here first. You can now start using Theopoetics. So let's
Yeah.
introduce that into our vernacular. I love that. I'm going to start using it seriously because it really does capture an essence about my observing everything around me and my creating things that I don't see in order to serve a greater purpose. And I'm excited to see where I kind of explore that journaling and stuff. Can you give me an example of something that is the antithesis to Theopoetics? Like the
Yeah,
polar
I don't know if there's
opposite?
like I don't know if there's like one particular kind of like opposite, but what I will say is there might be like a sort of situation that really feels not exactly conducive to theopoetics, and that is some like old white guy sitting in his room in some big academic ivory tower reading a bunch of books from Calvin and Augustine and whoever, and they're just writing their own theology.
You just
That doesn't
described
seem
half
exactly the
of
most
American
theopoetic
Christian.
way. That yeah, it just doesn't seem the most theopoetic way of doing things. Um, because theopoetics is a very embodied thing, right? Like you're maybe creating art or you're out in the streets doing activism or whatever it might be, but it's a very embodied activity. And so doing theology in this kind of old archaic way of just writing a bunch of things that you think of because you read it in some old book just isn't the most theopoetic way. I don't want to say that like is not a good way of doing theology. I think there's a lot to learn from people like Augustine and
Of
Luther and
course,
those
of
folks.
course.
But it is to say that theopoetics does seem to be doing something differently than that.
Yeah. How did you wind up into that headspace? Were you coming from a traumatic religious situation and you found this concept that seemed to offer grace for your relationship with the divine?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, so I grew up in conservative evangelicalism, and long story short, left all of that, but still was very interested in theology and Christianity. And at one point, I was listening to this theologian who is into process theology, which I'm very involved in. And I was just really curious about what they had to say. So I was listening to this podcast episode where they're getting interviewed about their work and everything. And I think I don't know exactly how it happened, but I'm thinking at some point she said the word theopoetics or theopoesis or something like that, right? And I was like, I didn't even know what it meant. I just like heard that word and was like, what is that all about? And so I literally just probably Googled it and started exploring and realizing, oh, a lot of my like favorite theologians kind of are adjacent to theopoetics or maybe even very directly involved in theopoetics. And so yeah, I just was like very intrigued by it and started reading as much as I could about it. And yeah, that's kind of how I got involved in the whole thing.
Did you have a period where you were? Because I think what I may ask this question to every guest just in hopes of feeling like it wasn't just me and that I just didn't give up on pursuing the divine. But I mean, I feel like I went through years of just like hating God or the idea of God, just trying to counter, that abusive relationship with God that I had growing up. Did you go through a period like that where you were just like, fuck this shit, like I'm out, deuces? Or did you always think like,
Yeah, I
I need
didn't.
this?
Yeah, I never had that journey with God. I did with evangelicalism.
Hmm.
So yeah, I became very disillusioned with the faith that I had grown up in, and really quickly realized it wasn't for me, and then immediately found like progressive forms of Christianity out there. So I never really had this period where I was like anti-religion and anti-God or anything. I just went from evangelicalism right into other forms of Christianity.
Wow.
And that was really helpful for me. So yeah, I never really had that phase where I was kind of like this like bleeding heart atheist or anything. Just never really did go through that at all. So
Bleeding
yeah,
heart
that's
atheist.
kind of my story for it. But I'm sure a lot of other people, right? Like that's not to say my story's better or anything. It's
Right.
just that's my story. I never went through a phase like that.
Right.
And yeah.
What is process theology?
Yeah, so my elevator speech of it, if it would even be possible, let's hope we're going a lot of flight, a lot of
Right. It's a
floors
very tall building.
up. Let's hope we're going up like the Sears Tower or something.
Right.
If I'm having to explain process theology in an elevator. So process theology, two kind of important things to it. The first of which is that the entire world is completely open to lots of different kinds of possibilities. So, in other words, the world has not been determined, right? For those of us who might have grown up in like more Calvinist type of Christianity, we would think that, oh, everything is already determined, right? Like the entire world, including your salvation, has already been predetermined. So in process theology, couldn't be more opposite. Everything is open to lots of different possibilities. Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that everything is in relationship with one another, including the little electrons that make up all the atoms of the world. Even those little electrons are in relationship with one another. And then obviously those atoms are in relationship, and the cells that make up your body are, right? And so on and so forth. And then getting to the point where even you and I are in some sort of relationship. And even grander than that, the constructions that we create as humans, whether it's things like racism or climate change or economics or music, all of those things are in relationship too. So even the things that we create are in relationship. So not just the physical matter that makes up the world, but even the things that the ideas and constructs that we create are all in relationship with one another too. So those are the two biggest things for process theology. The world is open to lots of different kinds of possibilities, and that everything is in relationship in the world.
That sounds like common sense to me.
It does sound like common sense, but you would be amazed how many people, especially a lot of Christians, would say, you know what, that's not actually true in the world. And I just can't believe how many people would say that it's not true when it seems like the most common thing, the most common sense thing to believe.
Why do you think that is, though? I mean, because I mean, to me, it would just there's an. I think that people are addicted to the binary. I mean, I say that all the time on this show. We're addicted to
Right.
definitiveness. Is that a word? Definitiveness. We're addicted to specificity. We don't allow
Right.
for gray space, which to me is where 99.999% of us live and operate. Is it just
Mm-hmm.
fear that keeps people from being able to think of God as expansive and open and ever changing?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it, because we want to think of God as this like very definitive, like we know for certain this is how God is, right? Like that God exists in the Trinity, three persons in one, yada yada yada. And yeah, it just doesn't really open a lot of space for a lot of mystery. And I really think that process theology really starts to open us to understanding God as changing, and that we don't have to have all the right answers about God. And yeah, I think process theology really opens us up to thinking about God and the world in that way.
It sounds like a very healing endeavor for you.
Yeah, it certainly has been for me. And I think it can be for a lot of other people. A lot of people who leave evangelicalism thinking, okay, well, I definitely don't believe in that God. But then they just kind of realize, all right, well, there doesn't seem to be any other way of thinking about God. So then I just for sure don't believe in any kind of God.
Yeah.
And I think something like process theology really opens up this possibility for people to believe in God in a way that's very different than what they grew up in. And they can even start believing things about the world that are very
Yeah.
different than what they grew up in. And in that case, I think it is really healing. It has been for me, and I think it can be for a lot of other people who leave toxic forms of Christianity.
Did the community that brought you up in very conservative evangelicalism do they support this outside the box approach to what they taught you?
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, I think they really kind of have farewelled me in a way. They really are hesitant and nervous about me, and that's okay. That's fine.
When you say hesitant and nervous, do you mean like about your soul?
Yeah, but my soul, and that because I do this work out in public, that I'm leading other people astray. So not only just for my own salvation, but for other people's salvation, they're really nervous. And it's because I'm really passionate about these big ideas about God and the world, and I want to share them with other people. And I think they really are nervous about the fact that I'm sharing that with lots and lots of other people out in the world.
Yes.
And they're very nervous and hesitant and fearful about that.
I know I've got a couple friends back home who are, because I think also like the younger you go in the world, like people are just naturally a little more open-minded just because they're around reality. But people that go to my parents' church will, say, oh, we're listening to Matt's podcast. And, I don't even know if they listen. I don't think they listen to it. But I know that my mom recently said, we're just so proud of what he does, in like the most diplomatic way.
Right.
Because it is, it is scary to like have these beliefs and then see your offspring like not really adhere to the way that you see truth and the way that you see God. Like I understand how horrifying that must be.
Yeah, I think my parents are in a similar situation. I've graduated from seminary, and I think they're really, in general, proud that like I've gone to grad school and have done that. But they definitely are very hesitant and, again, nervous and fearful about the kind of stuff that I'm doing in seminary or what I was doing in seminary. And I don't really know exactly how they talk to their friends about that are like, wait, Mason's doing that? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
I don't know how they talk to those people in their life, but kind of a very similar situation in that regard.
I was drawing a comparison yesterday for a friend of mine, just talking about like, my effort today is basically to kill God, or at least the idea of God of which I had. And then, cut to me in going to a Christian private high school where I was leading chapel and worship and, trying to convince people to believe my way. And now I'm like convincing people to not believe that way. I'm the opposite of a missionary, I guess. But it's what you just said really resonated too, because you're people having a fear of the people you're leading astray now. I have nights of anxiety where I have crippling anxiety about the people that I led astray, the people in college and high school that I made to feel worthless and made to feel like they had to believe my way. And some of them maybe still are. I don't know. And that scares me because I just think like, what have I done? Like who are they hating? Who are they treating differently at Starbucks or next door to their house in Iowa because of something that I told them? Maybe that's narcissistic to think that I had that much of an impact, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's why I'm so passionate now about speaking on where my truth is, because I want to counter what pain and trauma I potentially could have caused.
Yeah, I think about that all the time, of the theological world and Christianity that I was a part of that was so toxic, and in a lot of ways I benefited from that and also was hurt by it. But I also, because of that theology, because of that Christianity, probably caused a lot of harm in the world. And I think the way that we go about healing some of that harm that we've caused because of that theology, because of that kind of Christianity, is to be a part of theologies, think of theologies, and be a part of maybe religious communities or no religious community, or just be a part of communities that are actually countering some of that harm that we
Yeah.
created. And so that's part of the reason why I'm so interested in things like process theology and interested in the kind of Christianities that I'm a part of, is because I do think that it's part of the healing that a lot of this other Christianity and theology has caused. And
Yeah.
so I get to be a part of that. Even though I was a part of the Christianity and theology that was hurting a lot of people, I now get to be a part of the kind of Christianity and theology that's actually healing in the world.
Yeah. I know. I get asked a lot, like, do you ever think that you're wrong? And I'm like, yes, bitch. Why do you think I'm so vocal about my journey? Because like I'm constantly searching and looking and wanting to know more and see more and feel more. But I think it's funny because like I feel like my hatred of the divine and my attempt to destroy the God that I knew actually makes me closer to them in a weird way, because I feel like that much more honest than just blindly following what was instructed to me or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, we have countless examples in the Bible even of characters challenging God and even wrestling with God. Jacob was, named Jacob because he was wrestling with God, right? And we see so many examples of that throughout the Bible. So it's really hard to believe that then there are Christians that say, no, 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 that's not how you can have a relationship with God, when we literally have so many biblical examples of it.
Yeah, I know. What does the Bible serve in theopoetics and process theology?
Yeah, at least for Theopoetics, I think of it as kind of another source that we can draw wisdom from, right? That it doesn't have to be this like rule book or this science book or anything like that, but it's just another source for us to gain wisdom from. In the Bible, we see all these stories from people of faith who this is how they thought about God and how God related to the world and how they related to the world. And we see so many examples of them doing that really well and doing that really poorly. And so it's just like another way for us to understand the story of people of faith, some of whom, if we're a Christian or a Jew, we get to see some of our spiritual ancestors and how they, navigated all these difficulties of life and how they've navigated their relationship with God. So I think it's just another source for us to listen to when we're, that we're going through very similar things, right? Like a lot of the issues and a lot of the stories that we see in the Bible are similar issues and stories that are playing out now. And so we get to draw wisdom from that. And I think that's a really helpful way. And so I think that's a helpful way of engaging the Bible. And so I think that's how Theopoetics would engage it. I think that's how a lot of process theologians engage it. And so, yeah, for me in my life, that's how I really engage the Bible as well. Is for me, it's a source of wisdom. It's not the ultimate truth or anything like that. It's just a source of wisdom for me to see how other people of faith have navigated this thing that we call life and God.
Yeah. In your writings, you address the Bible specifically as it relates to faith versus belief, with the Bible potentially being an idol. Can you dive into that?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, so many Christians have the Bible as this idol that they think it's God itself, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is the Bible itself says the word of God is not the Bible, it's Jesus, right? And so a lot of Christians really miss that, and they actually prop up the Bible as this idol. And I think it really gets in the way then of them having a really wonderful, beautiful relationship with God.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, that they use the Bible in a way that actually hinders their relationship with God. And so, yeah, I think we really need to reimagine our relationship with the Bible as this really great source of wisdom, but not this ultimate truth that is basically God itself.
Sure. Do you feel like Jesus is literal? Like the Christ it was a palpable being that did walk the earth physically?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost unanimous among historians that Jesus was a real person. Obviously, how you think about that person, what you think of that person, that's a matter of theology. That's not something that history is really all that concerned about. But
Sure.
Almost all historians, I mean, there are some kind of minorities like scholars that would say that Jesus is sort of like this mythos, kind of like a Paul Bunyan or a Johnny Appleseed kind of like mythos.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, most historians know that there was a Jesus. He was of Nazareth, and he was killed by the Roman Empire. Um, and pretty much everything else about his life, we're not really sure about, outside of obviously the Bible. But almost all historians believe that there was a Jesus of Nazareth and that he was killed by the Roman government. And that's pretty much all we know about his life from kind of a historical understanding.
Right. Why do you think that is? I mean, it gripes me when we get, we open the Bible from page one with a pages long lineage of human beings, allegedly, and yet with this figure that changed the way that we process time and history, they just decided like, we're just going to talk about like the savior aspect or like the collection of those 12 guys aspect. Like, why do you think that it wasn't important at the time to capture every fucking detail of this man's life?
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to the fact that for followers of Jesus, that was not their concern. Their concern was not that, like, they didn't even think in the world in that way, that we need every single detail, right? And the other thing to keep in mind is that this was also an oral culture. So not everything was really, almost nothing was being written down. Everything was being told word of mouth. So almost everything we know about Jesus, at least from a faith aspect, was all word of mouth. Almost none of it was really ever written down up until probably a few centuries after he had died, right? And so you had to, if you're telling word of mouth, then you just need to get the important things down, right? And if you're a follower of Jesus and you believe that he's the Messiah, then that's going to be the important thing that you need to know, not what his hair color was, or what his eye color was, or how he liked his food, right? Like you needed to know the important things about him being the Messiah if you claimed him to be the Messiah, right? So that's why a lot of those other details just aren't there, because for people of faith, those parts didn't matter. What mattered was he the Messiah, and why is he the Messiah for us?
That's interesting. I want to move to another not so notable figure, which is unfortunate, because one of my gripes about where we are right now, specifically with American Christianity, is that the voices that I think are representative of the real Christ are not the ones that are being elevated, whether it's by the media or whether it's by the denomination heads, Southern Baptists specifically. But just so everyone knows, I mean, everyone knows, but maybe you don't. One of my superhero qualities is that I am a master at butchering names, and so Dietrich Bonhoeffer is something I want to talk about, just because you reference him, and it already sent me down a rabbit hole today. He's one of those voices that was in opposition to what was happening in the pre-Nazi Germany, watching what was happening and alerting the masses, and still, and I think even like had to. I don't know if he started the Confessing Church, but he was active in it in an attempt to counter Nazi Germany's attempt at unifying this evangelical concept of German Christianity. Can you talk a bit about him?
Yeah, he has a fascinating story, and how people think of him today is really interesting too, because there are obviously a lot of Christians and even people like yourself who are like, wait, this guy is really helpful in thinking how we need to stop Christian nationalism happening in our country in our day. Yeah. But then there are also Christians who think, like mostly evangelical Christians, who think of Bonhoeffer as an example of like, this is our guy, and like he would be in support of us. Right. And so, for example, one of the probably the most famous biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer was written by a person named Eric Metaxas, who is a very well-known Christian nationalist, which is unbelievable that here's this person who is like full support of Christian nationalism, Christian fascism, and yet he's the one who has written the most famous biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who is this very famous anti-Nazi, sort of, you could almost say anti-fascist, Antifa kind of person, who was really motivated by his faith, right? And that's just like hard to believe that there are Christians who want to use Dietrich Bonhoeffer in that way. But yeah, Dietrich Bonhoeffer
is it that hard to believe?
Well, that's true. Yeah, they are pretty good about like manipulating everything to be in support of them. Right. Yeah, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a early 20th century German pastor and theologian, and yeah, he was around during the rise of Nazism and Nazi Germany, and really, and you just explained it really well. You know, he recognized that this was actually a threat to Christianity and obviously a threat to a lot of people, including his Jewish neighbors and other people who were being persecuted and oppressed by Nazi Germany. And so he started being really involved in what you said, the Confessing Church, which is the church that was opposed to Nazi Germany. And at one point, he got himself involved in this group that tried to kill Hitler. They were able to attempt to kill him, but the attempt failed, unfortunately. And word got around of who was involved in this group, and obviously his name was involved in it, or a part of it. And he was imprisoned for a few years. And I think it was like 2 weeks before the Americans came in to liberate Nazi Germany, and went into all that concentration camps and liberated the concentration camps. 2 weeks before that happened, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was executed, and I think he was like 39. Yeah, I don't even think he got to 40, so he was pretty young. But
and he
again,
was he was hung, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was hung, and so partly because he was executed, was seen as this figure of this really important Christian voice against Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. And again, I think a lot of what he had to say, especially in regards to his opposition to Nazi Germany, has a lot to say with the current state we're in, right? Yeah. That we see this rise of fascism all across America. And I think someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer can be a source of wisdom for us to understand how should we navigate our current situation.
Absolutely.
I'll just say, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote a lot of things beyond just his opposition to Nazi Germany. He had a great book on creation. He has some other really great books around like discipleship. In fact, one of his most famous books, especially among evangelicals, is called The Cost of Discipleship. So he wrote a lot of different kinds of books, and in a lot of ways, I actually really disagree with a lot of his theology. But again, his resistance against Nazism, I think, is a really great example of how Christians in particular should be opposed to fascism. And he's just a really great example for that. And I think he has a lot to say for us in our current situation.
But in order for Christians to do that, they're going to have to get rid of that definitive, concrete, idolatry-driven worship that they're so attached to right now. And obviously I'm obsessed with Christian nationalism because it's just rampant. And I'm trying to get to the root of it. And I'm reading a really cool book right now called God in the White House by Randall Balmer. And it basically, there's 5 chapters that kind of just start with JFK, because it's interesting. We kind of touched on it a second ago, but Dr. Peel, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, was also head of the Marble Collegiate Church in New York City, which I don't know why they still claim him, because he's terrible. And the church now is like a very decent congregation, like that's inclusive and affirming. But anyway, I digress. Dr. Peel and Franklin Graham, and of course other notable figures of that time period in the 50s and 60s, they were so obsessed with him being a Catholic and trying to put out these pamphlets and propaganda about why a Catholic cannot be head of the nation, because it would just be puppet controlled by the Vatican. And their reasoning was because we have to have separation of church and state. Cut to today, when we have fucking senators, Lauren Boebert of your state in Colorado, who is saying we need to get rid of church and state. And you're just like, what kind of head fuck am I in right now? Like, I'm only through with JFK. That's as far as my studies have gone. We're moving into Nixon and Gerald Ford and all that next. But it's just fascinating and depressing.
Yeah, and the way that they're able to flip their positions on different things, especially politically, just when it benefits them, is just really telling of the fact that this is simply about supremacy of Christianity, of their type of Christianity.
White Christianity,
mind you, right? It's not even just Christian supremacy, but specifically white evangelicalism supremacy. And they're willing to do anything in order to gain that power, even if it means that they have to go back on some of their convictions of what they stand for or have at least stood for in the past.
Especially if they have to go back, not just win. It reminds me also of that coach up in Washington that just won the Supreme Court case about being able to pray at the 50-yard line. And I just was like, because, Washington has a very large Muslim population as well. And I'm like, I hope to Goddess that every single Muslim in that community goes and puts a prayer blanket down on the 50 fucking yard line just to say, oh, no, you said it's okay to not separate church and state. So we're just here to, show off our worship a little bit.
Yeah, I've even seen like some Satanist groups about to do the same thing, which I'm really excited for whatever news coverage that will get. That will be a fun little moment.
Oh, I'm ready to burn that cross. I'm so ready. Tell me about your podcast, because you have a couple, one of which is with your close friend Colin. It seems that you two have both kind of been on a parallel faith journey, it seems.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it didn't happen all at the same time, but in a lot of ways, we went through a very similar faith journey where we both were very disillusioned by our evangelical upbringing. We both grew up in the same exact church. That's why we're friends. Oh. And through that disillusionment, he kind of went through it at a kind of a different time. I would like to think that I sort of like was maybe the first person in our relationship to do that, but I could be wrong. Maybe he was already starting to have questions and doubts before even I did. But yeah, so we kind of went through a similar faith journey at the same time. And obviously I got really involved in like theology and the whole church world, and he didn't. And so in a way, my relationship to religion and Christianity and to God is a little different than what he is at right now, just because he didn't go through his faith journey kind of in the same way as I did. But yeah, in a lot of ways, we sort of both rejected the same things around the same time. And so, yeah, and that way it's a very similar faith journey.
You dive into topics that I don't hear, but I'm so interested in your writings, and also it gives people a chance to get to your website and also learn how they can subscribe to your writings. So tell us where we can find them.
Yeah, so I host a theology podcast called The People's Theology, and I interview lots of different people about the theology they're up to in the world. And a lot of times it's centered around activism and justice and thinking about God and the world in different ways than maybe a lot of people have grown up thinking about God in the world. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I do. I chat with all those different types of people talking about all of that. And yeah, you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And so, yeah, if you're interested in thinking about God or the world or Christianity or theology in different ways, it might be a helpful podcast for you.
And where are you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter most often.
And y'all gotta follow his Twitter. His Twitter is a riot because you just I don't even know if you mean to be, but everything you say, I'm just like, I don't even think the people that you're talking to know that you're talking to them.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's a fun thing. I've been on Twitter for a long time, and I always was kind of like trying to crack jokes and see if jokes would land or not. And then it just kind of took a life on its own. Again, like it wasn't like I made this like switch of like, I'm going to do Twitter this way. I just kind of always was doing that. And then eventually it just sort of gained some steam. And yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Mason Mennenga, all one word. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm fairly active on there as well. Again, same exact handle, Mason Mennenga. And yeah, those are probably the two I'm most active on. And I do have a YouTube channel that I'm coming out of hiatus soon. In fact, I've got my Pages app open because I've got to write a new script soon, and so there will be new videos coming soon. There have been a lot of people who are like, "When are you going to release a new video?" Because it's been over a year, and I was writing my thesis, and it just took a lot of time, and so I needed to take a break from the YouTube stuff.
Truly, like I love your writings. I didn't realize you had a Patreon for it, but I love Patreon because it's how I get it's how I also choose to support.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff on there. That's where most of it is.
I know the one that that made me think like, okay, this is going to be budgeted now. I think was the creation, right? The theologies of creation.
In fact, I write a little bit. Like I use Bonhoeffer in there, and then the person that actually introduced me to Theopoetics, Catherine Keller, who is my favorite theologian, I do kind of like this comparison between them.
I saw that.
So yeah, it's the person that I actually Yeah, and it's funny that you're like talking about my writings. Like, a lot of these, like, they're so old. Like, I kind of feel bad that they're still up there because I mean, like, I think I more or less would subscribe to them or be proud of them. But I think it's kind of funny that some of them they feel really old. Like
Well, it makes you think
even though
like,
like some of them were released in 2020, they would have I would have wrote them maybe in like 2019 or something. And so a lot of them are like
yeah.
3, 4, 5 years old now.
But you say
So
that
yeah.
like we don't refer to a book that's over 2,000 years old, and it makes you wonder. Like, do you think Daniel or Paul or John? Do you think that if they like came to church today to reference their own fucking words, do you think that they would be like, "Y'all, you're getting it wrong. Let me. I wrote this wrong. Let me explain this again."
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time of like, yeah, I know what my relationship is to my writing, so I can't
Hmm.
imagine that getting put into the Bible.
Canonized me?
I know, it's just like unbelievable that somebody would do that to my writing, and like if that ever happened, and then like, oh, that would make me quiver.
It's
That's
my
like too much pressure, it feels
my
like.
favorite quote to reference of my own words is, "If Jesus knew what was going to be done in His name, He'd be rolling over in His grave."
Yeah, wouldn't you have been born?
Right, exactly.
Okay, I'm not even gonna attempt to go through this.
I got in big trouble recently online because I said if Mary knew what was going to happen, I think she would have had an abortion. Um, but I stand by that. I just think she'd be like, "Look, this world's not worth it, Jesus. You're better off to not be born. Sorry, God."
Yeah.
Oh
Well, I
well.
mean, he in a way was sort of aborted like 31 years later, but 33 years.
Which I'm not in favor of third trimester abortions, but I am in favor of third decade abortions. There's a few
Yeah.
people I can think of that that could be aborted for the greater good of the world. Uh, Mason, I'm going to stop myself now before I get in too much
Yeah,
trouble.
we could go into a rabbit hole there. But
I
yeah,
really do.
I'm glad you like the writings, and I don't know if you're much of a YouTube person, but there should be more videos here coming soon. And
I
so
will. I will
those are
be
the things I
now.
feel like most proud of, honestly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I look forward
Yeah,
to
those,
seeing that. Then I will. I have the YouTube app, and I will now use it.
wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, there should be a video probably starting sometime August, probably every 2 weeks. So
Cool.
hopefully, and
Well,
if I'm able to ever do this stuff full time, I'd love to, put out more. So
yeah, I
we'll
get
see.
it. I get it. Well, I will stay tuned to you. I really appreciate your words and engagement online and for
Also,
always
my
expanding
thesis
my
is on
thinking.
Patreon now too. So I don't know if you can.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm slowly releasing. In fact, today, let me see. My next like, I kind of like I didn't put it all at the same time. I'm slowly putting it out.
Sure.
And I think today was my next one. 56 minutes ago.
Oh, dope. Very, very cool.
So
All
it
right. Well, I hope
came
that
out
you
56 minutes ago.
I
So
hope you
there you
hop
go.
off of here and see some good engagement.
There's like barely any patrons, so like people
Okay.
probably read it. I might get like 2 likes or something on it,
Well,
but
maybe
yeah,
maybe after this you'll get some more.
maybe we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Do you have hope for America?
Um, you know, I am hopeful for a lot of the people in America that we can bring about the world that we want to see. I don't think it's possible with the current government that we have. And so in that way, I hate America in that regard, and I would love to see that sort of burnt down.
Yeah.
But all the people that live in America, a lot of really, really wonderful, beautiful people. And I want to see them be able to have the power to create the world that we want to see. And so in that way, I love those folks and I want to see that happen. But I am not in love with
Yeah.
our current American government, and I am just not hopeful for that.
Yeah. Did you ever see the show Designated Survivor?
No,
And so
tell me
it
about
was
it.
it was on ABC, and then Netflix picked it up. I think for their last two seasons. I think it ran three seasons total. Kiefer Sutherland plays the Secretary of Housing. He's the HUD Secretary, I think. And it's basically like there's a State of the Union address in the pilot episode where everybody in federal government is in one location except for the one designated survivor, which is chosen at random, I think. And so in the God forbid circumstance where something catastrophic happens to everybody that is in the rotunda for the State of the Union, then you at least have one representative of a federal government who is still alive. And so in this pilot, there's a terrorist attack, we don't know where it's from, that kills every living member of the federal government except for the one designated survivor, which is Kiefer Sutherland. And so all that to say, I've been praying for it for a few years now. Not to wish death on anybody, but it's just like, right. I don't see any other option of success for this country other than either a massive revolution or a complete start over. I don't know which one is more offers more hope to people. I really don't. Anyway, it's a fun show.
That sounds like an interesting premise.
Yeah. What would you say to the divine were they standing before you right now?
I'm doing every goddamn thing I can to make this world a better place. And not in a way where I'm like fearful that God is like, are you doing what you need to do? But in process theology, I believe that God is constantly inviting us to bring about a better world. And I just like would love to, if the divine was standing right in front of me and asked me that question, or, I needed to say a thing to them, I would definitely want to be like, hey, I'm doing what I can. And yeah. Well, I don't know if I've ever given much thought beyond that of what I would say if I could. Again, with process theology, it's a panentheist theology for the most part. And so, it believes that everything is panentheist, not pantheist, panentheist. And so it believes that God, everything is in God. And so God kind of holds the entire world together. And so in that way, there really isn't that much of a distinction between the world and God. And so it's funny, they kind of ask like, as if God was this like singular entity that could stand in front of me, because in process theology, all of this that I'm around right now is a part of God. And, we can talk to it whenever, it is right before me right now. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a weird like thought to think that like God would actually be like a single entity standing in front of me, because like I just don't think of God in that way at all.
Sure. Well then, so, and I don't ever ask this question, but if you don't have hope in the America as it stands today, do you have hope in the future of divinity? In the future of spirituality?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we need a world where we are all connected in all the different ways that we can be connected in the world, and I think that one of those ways is spiritually. And so I think I think we need really healthy spiritualities out there that can bring us closer and again be a part of bringing about a better world. And so I'm hopeful for that. And I do think God is constantly inviting everyone into that.
Rad. I could get on board with that. I appreciate that notion. Mason, really a great pleasure to talk to you today and to hear your thoughts on the ether, the zeitgeist. I've got some things I'm going to go research now, thanks to you. You've got homework in checking out Designated Survivor and also reading God in the White House. It's a real thriller. But again, I really appreciate your time and your heart and your concern for humanity. It is so needed, and I'm just grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Matt.
All right, have a good rest of your day, okay?
There we go. How about that?
And all the people said, game in. Y'all, the Fagnostic Podcast is up for the Best Queer Podcast with the People's Choice Podcast Awards, and it would mean the world to me if you went and voted for the show. You can find the link on our Instagram. All you got to do is register, vote, and then unsubscribe if you so choose. So thank y'all for listening to another episode of the Fagnostic Podcast, hosted by me, Matt Hayes. You can find me at matthayes.com, that's MATHAYES.com, or on just the millennial socials at Hayes on It. HAYES on it. Please go subscribe, review, and share this podcast. And in the meantime, have a blessed day, and peace be with all y'all.
Hi, Michael Spicer here. Matt Hayes forgot to put my name in the credits of his podcast as the composer, but I'm here to tell you that I wrote the music for his podcast. Whatever it's called, I don't know.